I wanted to ask all of you actually. Well, actually, before I start this, maybe our panelists can just very briefly introduce themselves. Do you want to start?
Okay. Chris Tander, my company's London Corporate Media. I started off about 5 or 6 years ago as a cameraman and an editor, and moved into more producing the whole thing, and now the angle approach I approach projects from is a marketing-based angle, because the success of video is whether people see it and whether it connects with the audience, not how many pixels it's got or how flashy it is. That's my personal view.
I'm Paul Marden from Allcare Web Design. We're a web design agency that work a lot with a mixture of small businesses and also charities and not-for-profits. And I'm also a non-exec director of a social enterprise called Community Matters Partnership.
My name's Jonathan Hill. I'm the founder and I run a company called 1-1, and we're a digital consultancy up the road in Farnham.
And my name is Sheila Parry. I'm the managing director and founder of the Blue Ballroom, which is a communications agency for large corporates, and we're the founder partner of the Blue Door at DigitalSurrey.
Thank you. And I just realised when we started, I didn't introduce myself either, actually. So, sorry. Yeah, I'm Neville Hobson. I live in Wokingham, which is 25, 30 minutes away from here. It was tonight to get here anyway. So, I'm an independent communication consultant. I work for myself, sole trader, whatever label you want to give to that, although I work for companies doing stuff for them now and again. I write a blog. I co-host a podcast, which we started in 2005, so we're in our 7th year. And it's fun, it has sponsors and all that, so it's to do with business communication technology, so that's me basically. Let me ask all of you the kind of core point to all the stuff I was saying there. Do you agree with the fact that much of what we're seeing people doing is simply layering on top of stuff and it's a waste of time? Would you agree with that?
I think, quite honestly, most people, I would say, it might sound slightly hard, don't really understand what they're trying to achieve when they're using social media. Quite honestly, I'm probably one of them, is the truth. I think one of the issues that people have is that they are obviously getting themselves onto social media in the first place, but then they're not understanding how to build an audience and use it to be effective in business.
Right.
And also, I've tried it myself, and I have to say that I started using it, started talking to people on Twitter, and the thing is, it's very easy to suddenly not forget about it for a few weeks, and then you're forgotten. That's it. They're not continuing to build that. I see that a lot with our clients, that's for sure. And I also talk to a lot of people about building social websites, for example, and that's a very difficult one, because of course nowadays there's a huge behemoth kind of websites that people want to build their own social media websites, and that's a very difficult one as well. So I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding around how they can achieve results from it.
Okay. So do you think that, so what you described there was to do with those tools and channels? I mean, do you think it stems from the lack of understanding, stems from the kind of deeper sense of using them as engagement? Because, like you, I see that a lot as well. And when I raise this with people, I hear them use words like connecting with my customers, and I want to tell them what I think about X. So this suggests to me that most people see them just like any other marketing channel or any kind of sales route or communication route, which is the traditional way of doing it, rather than a bit like the kind of electronic equivalent of having a chat like we're doing. I mean, would you see that as part of those issues with those people?
I'm not actually sure I 100% agree with that,
okay,
to be honest. The reason I'm not sure...
Speak up.
I'm not sure whether I agree with that. Sorry, Abigail, I apologise. I'm not sure I 100% agree with it, just from the point of view that you see a lot of people tweeting, for example, or talking on Facebook about great day in the office today, or something like that, and you're not really adding any value with things like that. And I see an awful lot of that.
Yeah.
And frankly, personally, I'm not very interested. I actually tweeted something about a table today, and then I thought, my God, I can't, and I went to delete it, and then thought, oh, it's out there now. It's out there now, just leave it, it doesn't matter. And so I think that there's a lot of really innocuous, kind of banal stuff that gets out there, and I think people are also afraid of that. They're thinking, well, I don't want to tweet because I bought Twix, or, I walked down the road and said hello to somebody. So people are kind of, you know, how do you actually add value? And that's something I struggle with personally.
Okay.
So I kind of be on the opposite of that. I don't know if you...
I've got one quote in the back of my head from one of my clients that they make aircraft, they make light aircraft, and we were sat down and we were talking about Twitter, and I remember the managing director saying to me, how is one tweet going to sell an aircraft? So, you know, trying to get their head around what's the point of doing this, how, you know, and missing the point that it can be an engagement channel, it can be an opportunity to talk with people that are interested in the thing that you do. And try to find that one hit.
on that point as well, because I think one of the things that Neville spoke about was culture. I think Neville actually said the way we do things around here, you have to adopt, think about social media as to what will fit your behaviours, what will fit your organisation, what will fit your business or your enterprise. And I think that is so key when you're talking to somebody selling aircraft, you know, internally, establishing relationships internally and externally, you know, are founded on very many weeks and months of long conversations and long lead times, and you know, the ability to engage with your customers or your employees on the channel or in the way that they choose, I think is you know, determines, is more of a strategic approach than, and I completely agree about the layers. I mean, you know, if you're not talking to your customers and you're not talking to your employees on a day-to-day basis that suits them, social media isn't going to solve it for you.
If I can add to that, because it's interesting your example, actually, because I think if someone asked me that question, how is this going to help sell aircraft, I would say, well, it won't at all. In which case, if that's your objective, if you think using Twitter will help you sell aircraft, don't do it. That will not help you do that. So is it not then, if we pull out the 101 book, is it not like anything to do with a tool or a channel? It's linked to what's your measurable goal you're going to achieve. And when you've got to drill back on that to get to the what are we going to do to help us achieve this? And if Twitter pops up, you've got to figure out, is it? If it's not, then you're wasting your time. I mean, that's to me a logical response to what is often an emotional question. So if you approach it like that in conversation with people, you often do see in their minds when they're thinking, I haven't quite, you know, because the natural reaction is, what a waste of time. And your point as well about the table. I tweet all the time about having a nice cup of tea and all that kind of stuff. And I get people saying to me, some people say, you know, what the hell kind of thing. But I get others saying, that's you that we're seeing. And the fact that you like drinking tea first thing in the morning rather than coffee, we now know that about you. And now others might say, so who cares? Well, actually, some people in my follower group do. And anyone who's not following me sees it, could give it that. That's how it is. That's fine. So it is coming down to that element of it, which I suppose could take us to another discussion point, which is all this stuff about, you know, Zappos's metrics and how they've drilled it down, it's sliced and diced with all the numbers, all these things about where's the ROI and all that kind of stuff. Is that it? Is there no room now for the, I just have a nice cup of tea as part of closing a gap in understanding with someone? It seems it's going away as it's all being taken over by the scientific use of this that bores me to death personally. I mean, it looks not any good to me.
The nature of how I'm using it has changed.
Right.
So I was really lucky when I first started using Twitter because there weren't that many people around, and I was talking about the particular tools that we use, and the particular tools that we use are fairly, 3 years ago were fairly scarce. There weren't that many people in the UK talking about it. And so when I talked about what we did, it was a very small search space, and my now biggest client found me because I was talking about what we're using. That doesn't happen anymore because it's a much busier search space. But I guess the way that the nature of what I'm using the tools for has changed. I'm using it as glue to hold together a virtual team of people all over the country that I work with, either customers, they could be partners, and we use Twitter, we use Facebook to kind of hold us together and build a relationship. So it is an engagement channel for us.
So that relationship tends to be conducted in a sort of public light a bit, isn't it?
Yep.
More than it would otherwise have been. I mean, do you find that, does anyone in your community, if I can call it that, have a issue, have problems with that, or did they, and they now don't? How did that
It's
evolve?
going to be a sort of self-selecting group, isn't it?
Right.
So we're going to be we're a group of people who like interacting in that way, so we're quite comfortable in doing that. And those of us that aren't, some people we've kind of dragged kicking and screaming into this Twitter world. There's one person I'm thinking of who still carries his file of facts, but we created the Twitter handle for him and dragged him in, and now he is beginning to engage, but more or less it was a self-selecting group of people that want to use it.
Does anyone else in the panel use tools that way? With team building or community development internally or outside?
Honestly, no. The way that, again, the way that our company uses it is really poor. I mean, we're not even following anybody.
It helps to do that.
It does help, yeah. We're not following anybody. Actually, one thing I do notice is that every time I do tweet from our company account, we lose a couple of followers. So I'm obviously getting something really wrong. So it's almost like a little experiment. So we did lose a follower after the table tweet. So yeah, the table incident. So we'll see. But for me, you're right. I mean, personality, it's nice to get your personality across on these things. I guess what I'm looking for is, if you want to connect with people emotionally, you've got to have a bit more to offer. For me, if I'm trying to listen to them, then whether you share the same taste in tea or biscuits or whatever it might be, you know, there has to be, you've got to try and tie these things into things around the business. I mean, we're talking about from a business point of view, of course, here. So for me, it's a bit of a struggle, if I'm 100% honest. I don't know whether anyone else has.
I mean, I'd say sort of looking at the different organisations we work with, the more complex that they are, and the more multi-location, the more multi-tier, the more multifunctional, the more the opportunity to make connections that otherwise might not happen. And so what we're finding with the social, I don't know whether to place people on the social business to social enterprise scale, that some people will be plotted against different ones. Twitter, or internally Yammer, or social intranets, or Salesforce with NewsGator, whatever the software, doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is when people can put a profile up and find people with similar interests as each other, or with similar experiences that they otherwise wouldn't have met, then very, very valuable collaboration projects start happening. And I think that's, without any doubt, what's one of the huge benefits of that social media has brought us. It's brought us, you know, what the telephone brought, you know, 100 and however many years ago, where people in different offices can just see each other, hear each other, identify with each other, and then when they work together, they've got context and they've got a bit of...
What would you say, Sheila, to answer anyone who might say, because I've been in this discussion myself, where they say, well, I kind of do that anyway. We have Outlook, we have SharePoint on the server, and we've got the phone, so why would I want to use any of these things? What would you say to that person in terms of difference?
Well, I think, you know, with Outlook you can just get drowned in emails. You don't know, when you get an email from someone saying, want to connect, you know, you just think, I'm going to be sold something, or it could be a message, or it could be a, you know, you don't know. If you've chosen to embrace these channels, you're following people who are interested in, and internally you're doing the same. They almost come with a credential. So you know, people develop trusted communities this way, where it's one step more than your inbox. Also, as you said earlier, it's in public, so you use it positively in public, so that something you're sharing between two can be shared amongst 102 or 1,002 or just two if you're
Yes.
There's a lady over there.
It is interesting.
With a question.
Sorry.
There were some questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I find it very difficult to get into Twitter because I see it like a newspaper which is just full of adverts, and I really don't want to pick up a newspaper with adverts, so why should I go to Twitter? I'm quite interested to know those people who use it and are addicted to it, why they are, what they really get out of it, because people who follow me are all social media experts who want to give me advice. You know, I just don't...
I can understand how you feel if you've got those kinds of people following you. Would anyone care to offer a thought on that question? Yes, sir.
Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, I see social media as being about people.
Yeah.
And That's why I would imagine it's really, really hard for anybody in a larger organisation than 5 people to actually buy into social media, because they think, okay, so who is going to be the person who is our Twitter front man or woman? And what happens when they build up a huge following and then they leave? Because you can't tweet to Coca-Cola. Because if you tweet to Coca-Cola and you just get a reply from their PR people, which is not attached to a human being, then you're not engaging with anybody. You're engaging with a corporate, faceless non-entity. Because social media is all about the person first, and their functional role and their products and their services second, as far as I'm concerned.
What you've just described is what I see a lot myself even, which is, in my view, absolutely the wrong way to be using these channels. Because the faceless element, the monolithic organisation where you've got a department and someone, you don't know who they are, that's how we do it now. What social media is designed to do is to remove those kind of barriers so you can see those individuals behind those structures. So, for instance, you will see not the brand. I mean, you can't friend a brand. You can friend the individual who runs a brand or does something. And the ones that seem to be having greater success, and not by likes, by the way, but the level of engagement, thinking about Facebook, for instance, where you've got a huge, vibrant discussions going on their page, rather than just people clicking likes, tend to be those organizations where a combination of factors, including identifiable individuals where you can know a little bit about them, more than you'll find on the corporate website, and content that you really love to share or connect with, or other people or whatever. All those elements need to be in place. So those monolithic places you see, and Coke, in this example I showed, is one of those, in my opinion, are not places for engagement at all. The problem arises, mostly, I think, when those organizations say they are engagement places, and they're not. Why don't you just say, listen, this is a place we want to tell you about the products, that's it. So it's what you described, to your point as well, is one of the reasons why this is difficult for many people. And if you're on Twitter and you've got the folks following you don't actually like, just unfollow them. Or rather, don't pay attention to them. Seek out other people. So it could be that you will find topics you're interested in, that you'll find people talking about those topics. This is what I do. I'll encounter someone who says something to someone I'm following, and it shows up in my Twitter stream, and says something else the next day later. I'll take a look at that individual and see who they are, where they are, and what information I can glean on a quick look at their Twitter profile. Photo, brief bio, a link to something, and just a scan of their tweets, so I'll follow them. And I may unfollow them after a week, but that's how I tend to behave on Twitter. But, we're all different, and you have to give a bit of time to finding some worthwhile attention people, and just ignore those folks, and they'll eventually go away.
Stephen Fry isn't one of them.
He's not one of them, Stephen Fry, no he's not, I agree. So, sorry, there's a lot of hands up there, so, yeah, dive in.
My name's Steve Martin from the BBC.
Hi, Steve.
Clout score of 51.
What's your cred score? Do you know what that is? Cred? What's your cred score?
No, I've never heard of it.
Oh, okay.
God knows what that is.
Zero.
I'm really, if you'll accept that social media at its best is about conversation, and to your point, it's about between individuals, what therefore, this is a question for the whole panel, what is the role of the corporately branded channel on Twitter or Facebook? And if we're going to have one, how can it add value?
My old employer is British Airways, and they, you may know, struggle with times of disruption every now and again. It might be bad weather, it could be people on strike, but the planes do get disrupted, and there's a big kind of call to action. Everybody volunteers, all of the staff go in to kind of help solve the problems. And once I left, around the time I left in 2008, I was watching what was going on, and there's an operations Twitter handle for BA, and it's actually the head of operations and the head of Heathrow that tweet on that channel, and they tag their tweets with their name when they're tweeting. And there is a personalised element to it. It didn't feel to me like a faceless corporate channel. It did look like There was a human face to it. There were people's initials saying that they were talking about the things that they were doing to try and solve the problems in the airport. So I don't think it always has to be a faceless corporation. But one of the things that we were talking about before we started was that's really not very scalable. One or two people tweeting on behalf of a corporation isn't scalable, especially when you've got the Vodafone example where you shouted about a customer service problem and you got attention. How does that scale for a big corporate?
I don't think it can, really. I mean, if I could add a comment to that. I mean, I think your question is a very good one. And a corporate label or a handle on Twitter, in my opinion, doesn't work well unless it is clearly understood either what its goals are. Is this a conversational outlet or what? Is it purely a place where we make corporate announcements? Or what? As long as you understand what it is, that's fine. As long as the organisation makes it clear what it is. And the BBC is a good example of this. You've got lots of places on Twitter, most of which are dissemination channels, linked to news reports of different areas, so you've got different Twitter handles for them. Where I think it works well in many organisations, in fact BA is not a bad example, are organisations where it's corporate, and it says quite clearly, the official corporate Twitter channel for XYZ company, and you might have 3 or 4 people tweeting on it, and they're all identifiable. And if you go to the Twitter page, you'll see the names of the folks, and the link might be to a Twitter page on a website that explains what their goal is with Twitter. Very few companies do that, actually. But that aids to your understanding, and therefore how you understand how to engage with the folks via that channel, or not, as the case might be. So there's lots of good reasons why a company, or a large corporation in particular, would have, for want of a better phrase, a corporate Twitter handle. But what you tend to note, the ones that do, don't seem to use them very well. And to your point about, not being transparent properly, or not being clear, what the hell is this thing for? And so getting all the wrong kinds of questions which they can't answer. The worst ones are in the early days, because everyone's trying to figure this out, by the way, just to add that point. When you had the PR folks at some companies starting out, there were the PR guys doing a customer support job, because the only questions people were asking is, what happened to my XYZ? And the PR guys are trying to answer that. The rest of people are disaster without any question. But they were trying to figure it out, like we all were.
But then I think, when it wasn't the PR guys and it was the customer service agents who were engaging with their customers online, then I think they do provide a service. And it's also companies who are giving the opportunity to the customers who want to communicate that way. Because I think Twitter has given power to the silent majority of people who want to complain about a product but won't write a letter, they won't pick up the phone. It's very easy to diss a company in 140 characters and get a bit of a stir. I mean, we all know about Waitrose. Wherever you sit on the I love Waitrose. I'm laughing at Waitrose. I love all the Waitrose ads. We all know that this can gain ground, and so I think that sometimes brands do their customers a favour by having the corporate channel if they're really going to engage in the conversations with them, with customers who want to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, those examples mentioned Waitrose, and there are others, be within a second, okay? Are marketing-driven, marketing-led with a hashtag. There was one recently about Waitrose, which kind of backfired a bit.
Well, I suppose I would take issue with that.
But it did backfire, but they handled it quite well, to be fair. And so they had a bit of a baptism of fire in all these critical, sarcastic kind of comments that escalated, like McDonald's had also earlier this year. But that's marketing behind the objectives behind that were
I use that as an example because a lot of people have a lot of fun engaging with it and having the sarcasm and raising the whole, not doing the marketing but challenging the brand and do it at your peril if you don't understand how it works. But I think that corporate sites corporate handles have their role. Yeah, they do. In my opinion, I think they're wasted opportunity with that whole exercise, but that's just my view. Yes, sir.
My name's Adam. I run an independent software and digital technologies consultancy. I kind of agree with some things, but the last point's about how corporates are using it. If Coca-Cola's got millions of followers, I would actually see it doing a disservice to those followers if you really really saying that they're expecting to be able to properly engage with Coca-Cola, I'm pretty sure most of those people are more than aware that, you know, that channel for Coca-Cola is about Coca-Cola marketing to them and giving them notifications about what it is that they're doing, rather than expecting to be able to really engage with Coca-Cola. In the same way that, you know, Lady Gaga's 20-odd million followers, they know that they're not going to tweet to her and she's going to get that with a personal message. So that's that thing. And then the next point is, you know, having written software for quite a few years now, and all sorts of tools over the years, all sorts of different languages, you know, tools like social media are there for people to be able to use in the way that they best see fit. And so, if someone wants to use it to tweet about the fact that they just ate the Twix, that's great, that's good for them. In the same way that I'm engaged on Facebook, but I only use it to do quite specific things. I don't say, like, I'm going upstairs now to go and brush my hair. But a lot of people I know that do that, and that's fine if they're happy with doing But I think when we start saying things are necessarily the wrong and the right way, I think we can only say that when there's some context around that. Because more generally, if we say it's the wrong and the right way, I'm not sure we can really say that, because if that's the way people are happy with using the tools, and they haven't got a problem with that, then we should really have a problem with that. If we're talking about trying to use the tools for a specific purpose, because we're trying to do something with our business, with our brand, trying to engage with our customers, then I think we can say, well, these are the prescribed ways that we should look at using the tools, because we know from research and so on, you know, these are the types of results that we get from it.
I don't think we have any disagreement here, actually. I agree with your point about if someone wants to tweet about brushing their hair or go so that I make up a tea or whatever, that's fine. If you don't like it, well, don't pay attention to it, absolutely. In the case of business, where the difficulty arises, and just to be clear, by the way, I don't think anyone here is sitting here saying there's a right way and a wrong way. It's that rigid. You either do it like this or you don't. No one is suggesting that for a second. What you're hearing a lot, actually, is a lot of opinion from me and the others on the panel. You know, I don't think this, and I do it like that, or whatever. Yet, the difficulty arises when you're observing some of these things is reading or seeing or somehow understanding what some of these organizations say they're doing on these social channels. It doesn't fit with what you're actually seeing. So if someone talks about an engagement channel, and to be fair, you're right, Coke doesn't say that the 50 million likes on that particular Facebook page is all about engaging with people. They do talk about community building. I think it's a bit ambiguous, but that's just my opinion. So it is a free-for-all. It's a very disruptive part of the world. There are many, many views on how to do and how not to do. In my view, I think there's only effective and ineffective, broadly speaking. Yet you see so many people wasting their energy and time on doing things that probably aren't going to work. There's a frustration from a business point of view. I see that a lot. And yet, if I cast my mind back to when I started out doing this, everyone's trying to figure this stuff out. No one has all the answers, in spite of the 150 books you can find on Amazon. I mean, it seems to me often, our American friends in particular, the kind of pinnacle of their social media success is the book deal. And the book comes out, all that stuff. So that's how it is. That's part of the landscape too. Yet, to me, much of what you do see is tinkering. And I'm talking not about, well, we got 50 million likes, or it's about engaging. It's about what they're trying to achieve in their organization that they say they're trying to do. That's not what you see actually happening. And so, empowering or enabling this department to be out there on Twitter talking to all the customers, what is that going to do? A particular marketing goal, perhaps? It's integrated into your other communication activities and forms part of marketing. Typically, that is what you see. What I'm interested in is those organizations who talk about the next levels they're trying to achieve and the next stage of their own evolutions. The role of social has to be strategic, in which case it's not a layer. You cannot bolt it on. That requires a rethink of how people behave in the organization. That's a leadership issue. So it takes this out of the realm of just the tools and the channels into things that empower people, and very few companies are doing them. That's my argument. Lots of hands up. Yeah.
This feels like it's coming back to the authenticity issue.
Yeah, it is.
It doesn't really matter. There's a business objective issue, where if you've got the wrong objective and you don't realise what these tools do, you'll fail.
Yeah.
And then in some of the companies I think you're thinking about, I think you're bringing a personal opinion to it, that you're seeing them as failing to grasp an opportunity to be authentic, not, I think more than be social. It's almost like you're bemoaning the fact that some of these are sort of corporate monoliths and have these sort of buttoned down communication channels. And maybe they just don't care right now. Maybe they're making enough money and they don't understand that perhaps they're about to wade into the tar pit and be eclipsed by a younger, nimbler, more socially aware competitor. And you might be right, you might be wrong, they might have 10 more years of just milking it.
Is there not an expectation setting? Oh well, there's a mismatch of expectations. So your relationships fail when you walk up to it and you don't get what you expected from the outset. And maybe some of this is that they're not clear about what they're trying to achieve, and so you feel unhappy that you're not getting the relationship that you expected because they're not being clear from the outset what they're trying to do and setting your expectations of what you should receive in return.
But I think the gentleman earlier was right. I think the consumers are actually quite, they get this instinctively. You know that Coke isn't really trying to engage with you because of the tone of that communication. They've achieved what they're trying to do. You know that's broadcast. And then you've got the celebrity kind of tweets and things where you know that Stephen Fry isn't really likely to reply to you. You just feel like you've got inside his head a bit. And then you've got your friends on Twitter where you actually feel you are sharing something and you may get some engagement. So there are so many nuances here.
Yeah.
You can't, whatever you do, you can't make organisations of every size engage the way that you want them to engage.
No.
You have to, personally, as a consumer and as a business, the key for me is the unfollow button. And I follow a social media consultancy, and every day they just pump out, this is what we do, this is what we do. It's like, sorry, social media is about having conversation, so I immediately unfollow them because they obviously don't know how to, they're just pumping out information. And if I wanted to be sold Coke, I'd sign up to follow Coke. But I know where to buy Cokes, but so that's an expectation. But if someone is pumping out stuff that adds value to my life as a person or as a business, Southwest Trains, whatever you think of them, they pump out information that helps people, and they respond, and I've seen responses where they've taken action and gone and done stuff. So I opt in to receive that information. It's not going to help me as a business, but it might help me not get on the wrong train. Right. And if I engage with I follow a business because I'm expecting to get some valuable content from them that's valuable to my business, or we might be able to generate a relationship, and the way they're interacting doesn't look like that's going to happen, then I'll unfollow them and move on to the next person. And I don't get it right all of the time. And so as everybody else, people unfollowing goes up and down, and everyone has to find their right level, but you just have to opt in to receive the information you want. You can't change the world and make everyone engage the way you want to engage. You've just got to find the right people and establish the right relationships with the people that are engaging the way that you want to engage, because everyone is trying to do a different thing. And people that are in business now always only ever talk about what they have for breakfast, then that's not adding value to my life personally or in business. So I just want to get value out of the engagement, because otherwise I'm wasting my time.
I've got to say, you've got me really interested in what Coke are tweeting, because I just don't really understand.
It's fizzy.
Yeah, what exactly are these guys tweeting about? I mean, what is interesting here is if all those people really are following Coke because they want to hear some marketing stuff, that's quite an interesting phenomenon, really, because that's like opting in to sit down and watch hours of Coke adverts on TV. I don't really get that. That's just, that to me is astonishing. So is that what's happening? Am I missing something?
No, I think you're being snobbish, because a lot of people do drink Coca-Cola. I just looked at their Facebook page and they are engaging with their people. I think we're being a bit snobbish here, because maybe we don't like Coke.
I like it.
They seem to be playing games and giving promotions to people.
They do. Okay.
That's engaging. It might not be the things that we're interested in, but I think it's about the context. That the guy behind me.
Well, I'm sorry, I love games, so I'm going to go and sign up right now. Sounds great.
Back, you had a question.
Well, no question. I just had to book a hotel in Barcelona, and I go TripAdvisor to look at that. Now, the hotel I chose wasn't one that was necessarily the best score, but the one that when there was a terrible comments on it, the hotel manager came back and said, well, and gave a constructive response. And that was the level of engagement. But I thought, well, actually, these people do care.
Yep.
And that's the power of social media to me.
Mm-hmm.
But going on one stage further, when you talk about people changing fundamental of their organisation, I think there's so many larger corporates, particularly, who are so broken internally that trying to suggest that embedding a bit of social media in there, or trying to rework their organisation so it embraces social media, is like a bridge. It's not a step too far. It's way too far. If you empower a social, we talked about customer care agents, or whatever they call themselves. So you phone them up and you whinge to a communication provider that their service is awful because your broadband keeps dropping. Now, the level of engagement is way out of the scope of who are you going to speak to in that organisation. He can't fix their broadband or their copper cable any more than you can. So, you can try and address things by wrapping things up with social media, which is why I think what organisations are doing it that way. But you won't be able to fundamentally address the fact that BT or Utility Warehouse has a poor service in a particular area.
Well, that's what many of them are doing, though. They're adding
that's why
social layers.
Because they have no choice.
No, I suppose not.
Rework their entire organisation overnight, or even maybe over 10 years.
They can't. It will take time. It adds more complexity to it, because in the case of BT and those utilities, they've been trying to weld together legacy businesses for years. Now they're adding the social layer to it too, which just adds to the complexity, where you do get the contrast, the difficulties where people are not empowered to solve your problem. The issue is compounded, certainly in my opinion anyway, by the fact that they tell you, or you see words and so forth being used that suggest that this social layer is the solution to the customer service issues, and it's patently not. It makes it worse. But some industries are going to take a long time, others are not. Others will have people who are able to put in place the effective structures that suddenly do empower people, because a lot of this is to do with that. And I'm not talking about code and marketing.
Yeah, and it's impactful.
Yeah, it is.
But he was empowered to do something about it, and a lot of these people who are using these social media. I had a problem with British Airways a while back, and they just kept sending me around in circles on Twitter. They couldn't actually really achieve anything. So, and in the end, I gave up after about, I think, 10 or 15 tweets. I was exasperated.
That's just replacing, playing, swapping people around on telephone.
It is, exactly. No, I agree. Yeah.
At the back.
I think it's a bit like Twitter, social media, also social media. It's a bit like having a phone in your house. You don't use it for one thing, you use it for different things. And the way you interact with it is different. And you might follow Coca-Cola, but you might be savvy. I was picking up on that point about being snobbish. Those 10 million people following Coca-Cola, 8 million of them might be doing it because they might get a special offer or a competition or whatever. They know that. But they also might be following, they might be a graphic designer and they follow people who use After Effects to know where the latest updates come. You use it for different things, in the same way you do use a phone for different things. Big corporations haven't quite got that, I don't think. They seem to, well, sort of corporates, I mean, they seem to think that it's a way to broadcast their news and broadcast their marketing. It's not. But coming back to the point earlier, that Coca-Cola wants to interacting with them. Well, you don't interact with Coca-Cola per se, you might interact with the marketing director of Coca-Cola or the person he works with or somebody in the office. And then from a B2B point of view, which I guess is what we're all asking about, that person, if you interact with that person over a period of time, you might follow them on play, eventually. Just because you've engaged and you have that conversation. So I think we all use it for 50 Shades of Grey. We follow that.
Good point.
Angela
back.
Angela, at the back, someone has a question?
I think she's gone, but she was just saying about other platforms.
Oh, okay.
And facilitating better and something like that.
Gentleman here.
So over the last couple of years, we've seen obviously two of the big leviathans of social media, LinkedIn and Facebook, have their IPOs. So LinkedIn being very successful and Facebook being a bit of a disaster. So what does this market outlook, what do you think that says about social media in the future of the whole paradigm?
I think it says a lot for the hype machine at work. I read a report on Forbes the other day that suggests if you invested in Facebook, think of it as a very long term before you see a return. What does that mean? I have no idea, to be honest. I mean, it IPO'd at this, it's now down here. Does that mean that this whole industry is headed downhill? No, not at all. I don't believe that for a second. You look at others who've done extremely well, as you note. So I'm not an investment analyst, so I couldn't give you a kind of an intelligent view on that. Just that. This is for the long term, I reckon. If I had invested, that's how I see it.
You mentioned the Garden hype curve earlier on, and for some time I was thinking, well, can you pin social media to one point on that curve? And I don't think you can. There are lots of obviously different facets to it. One of the things I was quite interested in was that game draw something. So gaming, where you doodle and friends guess where it drawn. That had a 6-month little sweet spot, and then it was purchased for Zingo for a huge amount of money, and it's just completely fallen away. So that was an amazingly short half-life this game had. I'm just wondering now whether we're going to start to see other aspects of social media starting to tail off and get to the plateau.
Well, don't forget, most of these companies are born out of Silicon Valley, and that's not the real world, Silicon Valley. It's a unique place unto itself. And the kinds of money that you see floating around there isn't anywhere else on the planet, I don't believe. It's there. And so that is, I think, its own distinct ecosystem as to what actually happens. So trying to predict it, I think you need to be in Silicon Valley to do that. It's real difficult, I reckon.
The tail of the game, I think, is interesting, that it was so short.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested to understand why, by my calculation, an hour and 35 minutes, that was the first time LinkedIn was mentioned.
That's a good question. It's a social network, business one. Who's here is on LinkedIn?
All of us, that's what we did.
So why didn't anyone mention it until now? I mean, we're not actually, we've talked about Facebook a bit because of the examples that are given, but not really talked about specifics other than Twitter and Facebook.
Within the business context,
sure,
that's where we are. It is by far.
But do you not see LinkedIn, depending on how you use it, I guess, I see LinkedIn similar to Twitter in many ways.
No.
I don't use it for that at all myself. I use Twitter for that. LinkedIn is, to many people, a useful place. I see more business going on in the people I pay attention to on Facebook than on LinkedIn. I see more connections being made there. Amongst all the people posting with the baby photos and the parties and all that kind of stuff, there's conversations going on that are business related. I see on LinkedIn nothing but that, which is great too. I personally don't use LinkedIn that much myself. I tend to have more business discussions on Facebook. And I don't believe there is any, well actually I would not say any, I don't believe there are many, certainly for people I know, who are different to that. LinkedIn is, I read the other day, 10 million members in the UK now. That's good, I suppose. I mean, what do you use LinkedIn for?
Somebody who fits the category you described.
Yeah, what do you use LinkedIn for?
It's purely business. It's business.
So groups?
Yeah, the groups, lots of connections. I'm a consultant. I find lots.
Do you do the chit chat as well?
All sorts of things go on.
So like Twitter?
Absolutely. And Facebook is gets me nowhere.
No. Okay.
I don't do my question.
Yep.
We talk quite a lot about large corporates, and for small businesses to use social media properly, you need to use a lot of resources, and which are quite often limited. So either you do it yourself using your time, which takes away from actually often revenue generation, face-to-face meetings. How important do you think it is in that context? You know, I stress over getting the right things out in the right channels, and actually it really is taking away from time that I think I should be spending talking to people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want to achieve with it, is the first thing I would say. But it also depends on your own nature for the kinds of engagement you might endeavour to forge with people using a tool like that. But look at it from another point of view. If you're worried about the time limit, is think of Twitter as a listening tool rather than a talking tool. So you can be on Twitter and not say a word to anyone and pay attention to what they say about the things that interest you. And that's one way you then can latch on to people that you might then want to make a connection with. So that will answer your justification need about spending time there. When you find people talking about things that interest you, that's worth spending, giving your attention to.
I think I actually, you know, inadvertently that is probably what I do, partly because, you know, I was brought up on it's better for the world to think you're a fool than to open your mouth and expel all manner of doubt. And therefore I'm also afraid of tweeting too much and that sort of thing, because I know that 50% of people will think, oh, that's really interesting, that's great. 50% of people will go, I don't agree with that, and I could lose the following, if you know what I mean. It's a difficult one when you feel
I do have some experience of one tweet in this very room offending one of my customers, forgetting the fact that when I say something and it was on the tweet wall of about 9 months, a year ago, and I tweeted something, and it was pertinent to the presentation at the time, and it was pertinent to the room, and it's very hard with any sort of digital communication to kind of read tone into what was said, and they misinterpreted the tone that I used. So yes, you can make mistakes, but I'm not quite sure I'm not sure that's a reason not to do it. I think that's a reason to learn from it and do better next time.
I mean, you could argue that you wouldn't tweet, I mean, this probably sounds too simple to even to me, but you wouldn't tweet anything you wouldn't want you know, your husband or your wife or your boss to see in public. And it's not quite as, you know, terribly logical as that, because it's about emotion a lot of the time. That's what people want to find out about other people. So, you know, finding the right balance is the tricky thing, because on the one hand you could veer to having tweets that are so sterile and safe, no one's interested because they're not very interesting, to the other, which is all about the tea and the bus journey and all this stuff. It's kind of this effervescence of opinion that just overwhelms people and they tune out. I use Twitter mostly to think out loud. I'm not conversing with people. Some people say, why do you use Twitter? Maybe I'm exhibitionist. I have no idea, frankly. It's just a good channel. And I do a lot of my own linking and things to remind myself of things I've seen and encountered, and that it might interest other people. And that seems to be the case, because I get shares back as well. So a lot of the easy way to use the tool is to share content with others that you think just might be interested, even without thinking, well, I've got 15 followers. I mean, think about who is following you, and if you look at a little bit into who they all are, you don't ask them why you're following them, just find out a little bit about them in your own mind, based on what they have publicly published about themselves. And if that interests you, you might then think, okay, this is the stuff I'm interested in, they might be. And over time, you will then likely gravitate people who you have common interests with to follow you, and you'll find other people that way. But it requires that. And the only thing I would say is I wouldn't be too worried about, you know, saying the wrong thing, or, oh my God, I'm spending 3 hours on this. Don't spend 3 hours on it. I mean, I tend to do it myself first thing in the morning when I'm in the office, before I start emailing. 20 minutes looking at tweets, not scrolling back hours and hours and hours, just what I see at that moment, who's mentioned me, any DMs I've got, and deal with those. And then I'll take a look around at who's talking, and I have my cup of tea or whatever, and then I do my email. I'll switch out, I'm out of it then. Might go back at lunchtime, and maybe it depends on a lot of things, but it's rarely I'm there all the time. I see a lot of people I know who often wonder, is their job tweeting? Don't they have a day job? Maybe that is the day job, but because they're prolific. And yet, we're all different. And there are some people I follow who, frankly, tweet maybe once a day. So why do I follow them? Because I find what they say even once a day kind of interesting. I look at who they're connected with, I find that interesting. So there's all this is in your mind when you look at it. But start out listening to what others say. Find people who you find interesting and start following them. And I wouldn't be too worried about it, because you won't spend a lot of time on this.
There was one more question at the very back, with a gentleman who had his hand up for a long time.
I was going to say that I think LinkedIn is very important for the self-employed. It's a professional services search engine, as well as a professional search engine for recruiters as well. And yeah, you can look at the stats, you can see how many times you come up in search engine results, even without paying to be a premium member. And you can rank well on Google as well as a trusted domain. So it's good for promoting your own services.
Yeah. Personally, I don't find LinkedIn very useful. And I'm a self-employed person. I don't use it. I'm rarely there.
You're at the
I have a CV and a profile.
You're in the social media business.
No, it's not that at all. Not at all. Social media is a part of what the companies I work for do. But LinkedIn, I mean, I joined LinkedIn in 2003. I've been there a long, long time. I have a profile, which I actually invested a whole weekend updating recently. And I belong to loads of groups, and I don't use it for anything else. So I get notifications on chats on groups, I'll dive in and chat in the groups, but I don't use LinkedIn for anything else. I switched off LinkedIn ages ago because all I get was pitching emails. I hate it. Yeah.
So may I suggest you're doing it wrong?
I probably am.
We need to wrap this up now.
Yeah, I am. So, you know, it's Twitter and Google Plus work for me personally, with my preferred places to be.
Neville, could you make a couple of closing remarks?
Yeah. So, I'd like to ask each of our panel very briefly to offer one word of advice to our participants here and what they ought to think about with social media generally in the context of the mindset shift. So,
mine's fairly obvious. The one social media channel we haven't talked about all night. In 1 minute online, there are 100,000 tweets and 2.8 million views on YouTube. 50% of internet traffic is YouTube.
Okay.
Videos are permanent, they're not gone through a Twitter stream.
Right?
I do find LinkedIn useful. It's part of my networking process. I'll meet someone, they'll give me their business card, I'll exchange a LinkedIn connection, and it is the beginning of the thing that glues our relationship together. I don't use it to chat, I don't use it because it became very busy once it was linked with Twitter and it was too noisy a channel. But as a mechanism for me to start the relationship building process, it's the first step.
First step. Okay.
I guess the only thing that crosses my mind is, in particular to this lady here, I wouldn't worry too much about any tweets being particularly wrong. I've definitely offended some people through some of my tweets, and the reality is, unless they're terminal, they're going to really destroy your business. I wouldn't worry too much about things like that. Because at the end of the day, we all say, so I'll probably say something stupid when we walk out and have some drinks out here. That's the reality. I will. So the reality is...
Someone will tweet it.
Yeah, so maybe. But I probably wouldn't worry about it. I think that sounds like maybe... It's quite easy to take it a bit too seriously. And I know I made, was joking around about Twixies and things like that. But, yeah, I guess the worst thing you could probably do is have a few people think you're boring. And that's not the end of the world, to be honest.
I think rather than advice on social media, I'd say to the lady with the question on priority is to converse in the places that your customers are conversing. And if it's social, do it. And if it's not, well, the majority of my clients would be horrified to find me conversing about what I consult with them on, and those issues on Twitter particularly. So I wouldn't do my marketing there for that kind of work.
Terrific. So the only thing I'd like to say in conclusion is thank you all very much for being part of this. It's very clear that we all have different views about these things, which is terrific. I use certain things a certain way. You like LinkedIn, I don't particularly. That's great in the overall scheme of things. I think we'll all figure it out. Some of us are doing well, some of us not so well. We're all learning, we're all trying to figure this out. So those big corporations who are doing what Coke does, which I think is a total waste of time, they'll continue doing it, and we'll continue buying Coke. Thanks very much, everyone.